Welcome back to the Ace Your Retirement Show. I'm Alex Calott.
And I'm Austin Powell.
We're thrilled to be with you today. Last episode, we didn't have A-Train with us because he was literally in the process of becoming a father of two. Austin, what's it like? What's that transition like from 1 to 2?
Well, it's been an acclimation period. But I am happily in the girl dad club.
Yes.
Baby Landon, she's doing incredible. She's sleeping well. Mom and dad aren't necessarily sleeping great at this point.
Well, you fooled us. You look good.
I appreciate that.
You look good.
It's good to be back, though.
We're happy to have you back. And on another note, we are talking about the widow's penalty today. I recognize that doesn't really come with a very positive connotation. We're also going to talk about ways that you can proactively plan around that. So in general, Austin, share with us a little bit more about just what, in fact, the widow's penalty truly is, and what are some of the things we need to be super mindful of.
Yeah, so essentially for survivors, oftentimes what we see is when you make that transition, you're going to have less income.
Sure.
Your tax bracket is going to shrink.
Yes.
And now you're potentially opening up a window where you may be exposed to IRMA, which is Medicare's penalty if your income exceeds a certain level. And so the widow's penalty is essentially a combination of all of these things really coming down on you at one time. And so the way that you handle that is through proactive planning, which is what we're going to talk about today.
You bet. So the first thing that you alluded to there was the fact that when you're talking about transitioning from obviously 2 to 1, that could have an impact on income.
Sure.
So from a Social Security perspective, maybe a pension perspective, highlight for us what that really means.
Yeah, so a big misconception with Social Security is that if you have a married couple both collecting, that when one spouse passes, that both of those checks will still come in.
Not the case.
But unfortunately, that's not the case. Now, what Social Security will allow the surviving spouse to do is one of two options. They will allow you to keep collecting your own benefit, and that the deceased Social Security would drop off, or their own Social Security would drop off and they could switch over to a survivor payment. It's really an either-or scenario.
Understood. It's not both, either or. So you also take into consideration if you do have a pension or are fortunate enough to have a pension, because they're kind of few and far between at this point, they all come with different survivorship options. In some cases, maybe you took a lump sum and then you're not as concerned about that survivorship component. Maybe you took a slightly reduced benefit and did have a survivorship option. If that's an election you've yet to make, let's just be sure that we really explore and look at all of those options to ultimately protect both spouses, because I always think that's really the priority.
And I think, too, just to jump back to Social Security, something that just came to mind, converting over to a survivor payment in many cases is not something that happens automatically.
Great point.
It's something that you actually have to engage with Social Security on, and you have to declare to them that you want to turn that benefit on. And so if that's something that you haven't done or you have questions on how to do that, we're happy to be a resource.
And it is a little bit more involved. There's certain documentation that's required as opposed to maybe just filing off of your work history, as opposed to filing online for benefits of your own work history.
Sure.
You have to do that with an appointment. Appointment's kind of a vague term when it comes to Social Security because that can be done over the phone or in office. But again, how you go about coordinating that is a little bit more in-depth or unique. So just let us know. We're happy to be a resource.
And then, Alex, the next area that I think is important to be aware of with the widow's penalty is the tax brackets. Because, we have our current tax brackets. It's the 10, the 12, the 22, 24. But they're different for individuals versus if you're filing joint. And in many cases, when you're filing joint and then you all of a sudden have those brackets shrink on you, that could lead to owing more in tax.
You're 100% correct. Essentially, in its simplest form, imagine in the 12% bracket, wow, as a married filer, you've got almost $100,000 worth of room, and then all of a sudden, nothing's changed other than the fact that we've experienced a significant loss, and that bracket gets cut in half. Now, if our income exceeds $50,000, we're finding ourselves in the 22% marginal bracket. So it's a really big deal. And one of the things that we're hypersensitive to is that most retirees have a significant concentration of pre-tax dollars, Austin. Why is that so important when you're talking about a marginal tax bracket getting cut in half?
Yeah, so for folks that have pre-retirement accounts, Uncle Sam, the IRS, is going to want a share of those accounts as you move through your retirement.
That's right.
If you were born between 1951 and 1959, that RMD age is 73. If you were born 1960 or later, that RMD age is 75.
Do that.
The RMDs do not go anywhere, whether you're a married household or you're a survivor. Yeah. And so those required distributions are going to continue, oftentimes pushing you up into the higher tax bracket.
No question. So again, just to reiterate, if unfortunately we were to lose a spouse, our IRA balances don't decrease. The spouse's IRA just becomes your own. And that required minimum distribution is predicated off of the total amount of retirement dollars. So that percentage that you have to take out based on that total amount is still going to be a significant amount. In other words, the tax brackets are half as favorable, but the RMD is just as punitive.
Still the same.
So we really need to be mindful of how that can affect the surviving spouse. And then on the topic of taxes, one of the things that I think is always an ongoing dialogue amongst our team is we're in a tremendous amount of debt. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
And when I say we, I mean the U.S. So when we talk about $38 trillion of debt, Austin, you could make a real argument we're at historically low all-time marginal tax brackets. What happens if tax rates go up? And then two, you're forced into a single filer's tax bracket.
Well, it means more tax, you know, is the tax. And Alex is right. If you look at our current tax brackets, just from a historical perspective, you look at it on a chart, they're actually very low right now. And so if those rates were to go up, that just means that more of your RMD is going to go to your state Department of Revenue and the Internal Revenue Service, which leads us to a point where, Alex, you know, now we got to think about, well, hey, we know that this is the problem that is ahead.
Sure.
What are some of the strategies? What are some of the techniques that we can deploy and utilize to help offset some of these penalties that we might face in the future?
I think you always have to look at each circumstance in a unique form or fashion, but taking advantage of being able to file married jointly truly is an asset. That alone is an asset. So while that is very much part of the equation, proactively looking at potentially shifting pre-tax dollars into Roth in the form of a Roth conversion. And again, everybody's circumstance is unique, but by doing so, you're able to then control your RMDs in a much better form or fashion. And once again, you're just taking advantage of not only historically low rates, but the fact that it is a married rate as opposed to a single filer.
And that is a great strategy. SRC, strategic Roth conversions. And just to recap that's the process of taking a portion of your pre-tax retirement account balance. It could be a 401k, it could be an IRA, paying the government a portion of tax, and then transferring that over into a Roth where you're no longer going to have an RMD. You know, the way we look at it is this: the higher your pre-tax retirement account balance is when you get to your RMD age, the higher your required distribution is going to be. And the higher your required distribution, the higher your long-term tax liability. You know, the IRS, Alex, I think if they had a preference, they would prefer to see you defer it and have a big RMD. 100%.
And the IRS also knows that, you know, the one thing that's not given is life expectancy. And again, there's in most cases a situation where it is one spouse that's left at the end of the day. And they recognize that they're going to get more of that RMD in that retirement account when that's the case. So by proactively planning in advance, you get to control the taxation a little more effectively.
And it's our philosophy that we would prefer to take distributions and withdrawals from your retirement accounts on your terms versus leaving it to the government to impose those withdrawals on their terms.
100%. So we've got to be mindful, of course, of taxation, got to be mindful of a decrease in income, but then also they really hit us, you know, when we least expect it with IRMA.
Yeah.
So Austin, talk to folks a little bit about how, okay, you're married, you've got a threshold of $218,000 before you start paying a penalty on Part B, Part D, but then all of a sudden something were to happen. What happens to that threshold? What does that mean for folks?
Threshold gets cut in half.
Yeah.
In IRMA, just to take a step back for a minute, that is a penalty. That is a surcharge that Social Security and Medicare impose on your Medicare Part B, which is really for your doctor's visits in retirement, and your Medicare Part D, which is your prescription drugs. And so the standard rate for Medicare right now, Medicare Part B specifically, is $202.90 per month per person.
Right.
But if that income exceeds a certain level, that's when that penalty is triggered. And that can be pretty punitive. And
up to the tune of almost $700.
Yeah. And so it's a very significant penalty. What's also interesting is that they do a 2-year look back.
That's right.
When they're assessing that penalty, they're actually looking at your income from 2 years ago. Now, if you do have a marital status change, that does open up an opportunity to submit a life-changing event form, if you want to expand on that form a little bit.
So the life-changing event form, of course, is retirement would qualify as a life-changing event form amongst a number of others. But it's just, if something major has gone on in your life, it's worth consideration, and there are ways to reduce that as long as it's a qualifying event. I think the key takeaway, though, is just understanding RMDs are not cut in half. A lot of times your Social Security is not cut in half because the higher benefit continues on. Sometimes there's survivorship on pension. So your income itself is still going to be relatively high. Mm-hmm. You're just not going to have as much, I guess, so to speak, kind of options or room in the Medicare thresholds. So really something we want to be truly mindful of and make sure we're taking into consideration proactively. Last piece, Austin.
Yeah.
Folks ask about QCDs, other tax planning strategies, ways to just be proactive with these pre-tax account balances. Just touch on that to give folks an idea of just other considerations on how to lower those IRA obligations.
Well, I think as you're moving through retirement, there's really 4 key tax levers that everybody should be considering. And they're not proprietary, by the way. And the first is the withdrawal source and the withdrawal order that you are pulling from your income as needed. You know, your Social Security a lot of times is only going to cover a portion of your expenses. Yes. And so you're going to have to go to your portfolio above and beyond that. And so some of you might have Roth accounts, you might have IRA accounts, it might be invested, taxable brokerage accounts, but the source and the order in which you're pulling from those accounts, it absolutely matters. Mm-hmm. The second tax lever is what we've just alluded to, is the Roth conversions, so that you can do withdrawals on your terms instead of putting it in the hands of the IRS. And then tax lever number 3 is going to be Social Security. The timing of your Social Security, Alex, is actually going to make an impact on your long-term retirement.
No question. And then lastly, I think it's probably going to be those QCDs where we talk about qualified charitable giving, and that begins as early as 70 and a half, where you're able to actually give directly from the IRAs, reducing your future RMD obligations, and of course, making a difference along the way. I think the key takeaway in all of this is take advantage of the opportunities that are presented with the married kind of filing jointly marginal tax rates. But more than anything, be proactive, right? Don't wait to solve for the widow's penalty on the back end. Look for ways to be as proactive as possible on the front end.
That's it. The key word is proactive. And so if this is something that you're thinking about and you want to be as efficient as possible, you don't necessarily want to overpay and you want to keep as much in your pocket as you can, this is something that we're happy to have a conversation with you on.
We'd welcome it. Thank you all again for being part of the Ace Your Retirement Show. We look forward to seeing you next time.